Hello, everybody, and welcome to History Bite number 319, dated October the 16th, 2021. I'm Walter, your mobile historian and blue-collar scholar. Thank you so much for tuning in. This History Bite is entitled Maryland Legends, Robert M. Bell. Before I begin, however, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Juarez Lee Shelton, M.A. In addition to that, please also click on the little notification bell immediately to the right of the subscribe button. In doing so, you will receive notices when I post new, exciting, and enlightening videos in history, law, political science, theology, and philosophy. Thank you so much in advance. So again, this video is entitled Maryland Legends, Chief Judge Robert M. Bell. Maybe you've heard of Chief Judge Bell. Maybe you have not. Maybe you've heard of him and don't really know much about him, but would like to learn a little more. Well, this video is the right place for you. So, Robert M. Bell, is a Maryland legend, not only because of his role in helping to dismantle Jim Crow in our beloved state, but also because he was the very first and to date only African American to serve as Chief Judge of the Court of Appeals of Maryland, which is our state's Supreme Court. Chief Judge Bell was the only African American to ever preside over the Court of Appeals to date. And as Chief Judge, he was, of course, the constitutional head of the Maryland judicial system. The first person of color to ever hold that role, serving in that position for 17 years, from 1996 until his retirement in 2013. So, Robert M. Bell was born in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, on July the 6th, 1943. Less than 2 years later, his mother moved he and his brothers to Baltimore, where they settled on the city's east side. Bell attended Dunbar High School, and in June of 1960, at the age of 16, he and several other young people were arrested for engaging in a sit-in at a local restaurant and refusing to leave when being ordered to do so. These individuals, of course, were protesting racial discrimination at the restaurant itself. Subsequently, they would be convicted of criminal trespassing and fined $10, a lot of money in 1960. These convictions were affirmed by the Maryland Court of Appeals, which rejected their arguments that the public accommodations rules here violated the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. So on appeal to the Supreme Court of the United States, the justices in the case known as Bell versus Maryland, yes, he's got a Supreme Court decision containing his name, In Bell versus Maryland, the court did not pass judgment on the merits of the case, but instead vacated the decision and remanded it back to state court for it to be decided whether or not the convictions should be affirmed, as changes had occurred in Maryland state law. Accordingly, the convictions were reversed by the Court of Appeals of Maryland, as the state had passed a public accommodations law outlawing this type of segregation, as well as the Civil Rights Act of 1964 had been passed by Congress. And that was the primary reason the court didn't pass judgment on the merits in this case, because had they done so, it would have eliminated essentially the need to even pass the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So the court effectively dodged the question and allowed the political process to run its course. Wise move. So Robert Bell would ultimately earn his bachelor's degree in history and political science at Morgan State University, though it was known as Morgan State College at that time. He graduated in 1966. After college, he would attend Harvard Law School, all right, in Massachusetts, and graduate with his JD in 1969. Right? He was the very first Morgan State graduate to graduate from Harvard Law School. Did you know that? Subsequently, Bell returned to Maryland after obtaining his JD from Harvard Law, was admitted to the Maryland State Bar the same year, and went into private practice in Baltimore. He wasn't going to be doing that very long, however. In February of 1975, Governor Marvin Mandel appointed Bell as an associate judge of the District Court of Maryland for Baltimore City. He was 31 years of age at the time. Okay, that appointment made Robert Bell one of the youngest people ever appointed, if not the youngest person ever appointed to the bench in the state of Maryland. All right. He would serve on the district court for 5 years until being elevated by Governor Harry Hughes to the circuit court for Baltimore City in 1980. Bell served with distinction on the circuit court for 4 years before he was elevated once more by Governor Hughes to the Court of Special Appeals in 1984. In 1991, all right, he would be appointed by Governor William Donald Schaefer as an associate judge of the Court of Appeals of Maryland, succeeding Judge Harry A. Cole, who is discussed in length in another video. Judge Cole was, of course, the Court of Appeals' very first African-American member and had served since 1977, all right? And Robert Bell was appointed to succeed Judge Cole on the Court of Appeals, all right? For the next 5 years, Robert Bell served as an associate judge of the Court of Appeals of Maryland until the retirement of Chief Judge Robert C. Murphy in 1996. It was at this point that Governor Paris Glendening decided to add to Robert Bell's status as a history maker and appoint him as the Chief Judge of the Court of Appeals. Bell thus became the court's first and to date only African-American Chief Judge, serving in that role from 1996 until 2013, a total of 17 years, all right? During his time on the Court of Appeals, Chief Judge Bell developed a jurisprudence which strongly protected the rights of the accused, the constitutional rights of people in general, and those historically facing discrimination. He is known for passionately advocating for, greater access to justice, especially for those who have been historically denied such access, all right? The courts often being their only avenue for redress, okay? Chief Judge Bell led the court with dignity, grace, and a touch of humor when appropriate. During his time as Chief Judge, he swore in 3 Maryland governors: Glendening in 1999, Ehrlich in 2003, and O'Malley both in 2007 and in 2011. On July 6, 2013, Chief Judge Bell retired from the Court of Appeals of Maryland, having reached the maximum judicial service age of 70. His retirement concluded 38 continuous years of judicial service to the state of Maryland and a legacy distinguished by fairness and access to justice. Bell would be seated in that role as chief by fellow Court of Appeals Judge Mary Ellen Barbera, who would lead the court for the next 8 years. Consequently, Barbera would become the first and to date only female chief judge of Maryland's highest court. So 2 history makers, one after the other. It's a beautiful thing indeed. All right. So Chief Judge Bell is a person, on a more, reflective note, that I, hold dear. He's a great guy, in my opinion. As many years ago, he was gracious enough to grant me 2 in-person audiences to discuss the judiciary, as well as my own ambitions. All right. The first audience was at his Baltimore chambers in March of 2004. I was 19 at the time. And the second audience was at his Annapolis chambers at the Court of Appeals of Maryland in November of 2008. And I was 23 at that point. During the course of the second audience in Annapolis, I asked him if I could sit on the Court of Appeals bench, which it totally blew my mind. He obliged with no problem. So I would sit on the bench right in his chair at the very center of the Court of Appeals bench. And he took 2 photos of that monumental occasion for my records, and I treasure this very much. All right. I speak on this, by the way, in a separate video entitled Sitting in the Chief Judge's Chair. All right. So needless to say, I was on cloud 9 for those few moments. And for quite some time afterwards, you couldn't tell me anything for the rest of the day. Few people can say they've sat in the Chief Judge's chair on their state's highest court. All right. And that's something that I, like I said, still hold very dear to this very day, So, in conclusion, Robert M. Bell has left a legacy, He's a history maker in his own right, in helping to demolish Jim Crow and, of course, breaking racial barriers, becoming the first Black Chief Judge of Maryland's highest court. He's also left a legacy committed to the equal and fair access to justice in Maryland's courts and the defense of the rights of all Marylanders. All right. Therefore, Chief Judge Robert M. Bell has more than earned his place as a Maryland legend and a prominent figure, in Maryland's African American history. So I thank you so much for listening to this brief biography about Maryland legend, one of my personal role models, Chief Judge Robert M. Bell. All right. If you have any questions or controversies, you can leave them down below and I'll be happy to answer them. If you like this video, gain some insight from it, like the video for me. It means a lot. And if you've not subscribed to my channel as of this point, please do so now. It would mean a great deal and you become a member of my fan base. I don't disappoint with the videos. I think you'll like them all. So take care, stay safe out there, and I'll talk to you at the next video. Peace.